Hey, it's Brian. I'm here. I'm doing a podcast, third show. This is the bonus feed where it's just me, so you don't get like a really good intro or anything. Which, by the way, my wife made fun of my intros to this show now, so I'm extra fucking like weird about it. So now I'm trying not to do the same thing. But this week I have somebody that I met that I have followed on Twitter for a while. It is Melly, or you probably know her as Epona, Epona West on Twitter. Hi, Melly.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm okay. I'm
Yeah,
fine. I'm
you good?
that intro fucks me up now because like just a couple days ago, I was talking about like Brett is so good at like opening the show. He like has this whole thing down. It's like 2 minutes. And she was like, you got your own thing. And like, I don't want that to be my thing. What just happened?
That's your thing now, though.
That's what she calls my thing. She's like, that's your thing. And I'm like, well, I don't want that to be that's horrible. That thing sucks.
Yeah, I had a podcast that lasted for 6 episodes. And my sister, who produced television for a while, was like our producer, and she would like produce me doing the intro all the time. And so I'd get really, really nervous, and that's when I did like most of my this is the lady podcast. Wait, no, that's not the name, but yeah.
It's got to be two. You like that's the good thing about 2 or 3 people is one of you will figure it out. No, I mean neither one of us were pros, but he kind of was like, "Hey, I want to like sound like I'm doing radio, so maybe I'll do that part."
Yeah.
So it kind of just ended up working out. It was like a bunch of years of like, I mean, you did 6 episodes. It was like
Right.
years.
I did 6 paltry episodes of a shitty podcast.
Ours, I mean, I just people don't understand how long it takes to figure out who you are on a podcast, and it's like, you know, you're like, okay, maybe I am the person who does the intros, or maybe I'm the straight man, or I'm the not as funny one. Maybe I set them up, and it took us for fucking ever to figure that shit out.
Yeah, like going into it. I mean, I knew that I wasn't the funny one because like she was definitely like the person with the good commentary. And I would just be the person saying things and then occasionally like getting too angry.
Yeah, well, that was this show for like 2 years. There's like a 2-year span of this show where it was just basically 2 guys mad all the time in politics. It was just us like yelling about drones like constantly, like then these fucking drone strikes like every time.
They're making the kids like afraid of the sky.
Yeah, it was like 2 things. It was like drone strikes, and then of course the war on drugs. The most selfish thing that I can be mad about, just because it's like I just want fucking drugs, okay?
Well, ours was about reality television, and like we were trying to appeal to like a more left audience, and so those 2 things don't really mesh. And so we'd be like deconstructing shows that nobody watched or like had any interest in watching. Who's gonna watch season 5 of Say Yes to the Dress except for me?
Yeah.
So like
everybody seems like they're watching Temptation Island now. To me,
I haven't watched any of it. I don't know what happened. I used to love stuff like that, like Bachelor in Paradise. Like I would live for that just as all the contestants would. And Island seems like it should be my jam, and yet I'm not right there.
I watched it the first time and remember thinking it wasn't like really what I was. I don't know. Maybe it seems like basically, for full disclosure, all the people I know that watch Temptation Island are also like really into wrestling too. So it must just have some weird, it has a weird crossover. It's on right after wrestling, but these are people that don't even watch that wrestling, and they're just like, I got to turn on Temptation Island. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I watch so much bad stuff, but I think it has to be fiction. You know, like the reality stuff is almost that, like, once reality TV is essentially wrestling where you have to suspend disbelief, and for some reason I can suspend disbelief when there's like dead people and like all the different characters you see in wrestling. For some reason I can suspend disbelief for that, but then when I watch reality TV, I'm like, it's so fake.
Well, it's gotta be something specific. Like you have to there's for a lot of the shows, like it falls into an easily recognizable script if you're like paying attention to it. And there's not like physical drama that's really going along with it. They're just sort of doing motions. And so like stuff with Survivor is the stuff that I can get into in the way that you're talking about, like you do with wrestling, because like you can physically see changes on their bodies from being outside for weeks.
Those first few years of Survivor, I watched probably the first 3 or 4 seasons up until Africa, whichever that was the first Africa. And then I thought they were going to kill those people in Africa. So I was like, I don't know if I can watch this show anymore.
Like, yeah, Africa was the first one. But yeah, in the first couple of seasons, but yeah, and like so you can keep the engagement a little bit more in those things. But when it comes to stuff like The Hills, where it's just like them making dramatic faces at each other, or like, I mean, even to a certain extent, The Bachelor, where every single season is exactly the same. Like you meet the same people, they have the same issues. You're not here for the right reasons. It's like watching the same thing over and over again.
Right. Well, I mean, that is like the other same thing about wrestling is that like really I guess you could maybe not be in the target audience anymore if that's because I think the target audience wants like the same thing every single time. The people that are like people that are really into The Bachelor, they like want all the same beats in every season, you know, like that's what they're looking for. So you like, I think with some of that reality, you're going to watch 1 or 2 seasons, you're going to figure the show out and then move on, I guess. I don't even know what's out there anymore. I'm watching like, the only thing I've watched recently that could be considered reality is Marie Kondo, that show. Are we cutting out? Is this cutting out real bad?
See, I can't. That show makes me nervous. I get really nervous.
Are you a hoarder? Do you keep stuff laying around all the time?
Cutting out for you?
Yeah, it is cutting out. Is it cutting out real bad for you? Hello? I think we're cutting out here. Give me a second here. Let me see what I can do.
No, not at all.
Oh, it's not cutting out for you at all? Give me 1 second. Let me try something here. Let me try something here real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay. There is that. Am I here now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There is like you are cutting out, but you were, but I don't know if you are. There's like 100 people using the internet in this house at all fucking times. So it makes it hard. Okay. All right. I think we can, I'll make sure to, let me tell Jake to, okay. 8 minutes. All right. So yeah, I watched Marie Kondo because I love watching people throw shit away.
Yeah.
I just, cause I am like, I'm not a minimalist because I have shit, but I hate like stuff. I really hate collectors. Like they make me so mad.
Just like in general, like collectors of anything.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you collect stuff on your computer, cool. Like if you collect like digital stuff or something, I'm fine with that. But people who just have a bunch of something, just like I always it makes me crazy because I feel like I hate to be mean because I know there's people that listen to the show obviously that collect things, you know,
right?
But I hate to be mean, but like somebody is gonna have to throw that away when you die, and that makes me crazy to think about, you know.
Yeah. The opposite. I have the opposite like anxiety about things. So like my mom is like you, where she doesn't like having like items, like it bothers her. And with certain items like heirlooms and things that are like from the family, she doesn't want to throw those away, and so she just foists them onto me. And and there's been a couple of times where like I moved, like when I moved back from Michigan to Arizona, I left out a whole box of just like, you know, stuff from the family farmhouse in Canada, or like my grandmother's kerosene lamp, like stuff that I was gonna, incorporate into my everyday life, like a kerosene lamp, as one does. And I left that with the intention of having like somebody go pick it up for me so that they could mail it to me later. And it just got lost. And then my mom yelled at me for like a really long time about how she can't trust me with anything, but then she kept giving me more stuff. And so now I have like this anxiety about, accidentally losing something that has value, like that came from somebody before my mom. And so like, I don't know, I've got a whole bunch of weird, like, family heirlooms, like for my great grandmother and stuff.
I can tell you when my grandma died, they had to go through her house, and we had like this silverware from like the 1800s.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, my parents were like, Brian, we think you should have this silverware, and I've sold every single piece of it to be melted down so that I could live for the years that I was like going to college and Street Fight wasn't making any money and I didn't have a job. Like,
hey,
who's gonna want that shit anyway? Really? Brett was like, you should sell it on eBay. I'm like, it's got a big Q on it. Who gives a shit? I just don't I don't understand the need to have a bunch of like nothing's worth anything, really.
That's true.
In my mind, I think like, you look at things that you think are worth something. Like I think that one of my prized things that I own is the first t-shirt that we did for the first big live show with Chapo that we ever did. I have this t-shirt and I won't fucking throw it away. It's one t-shirt. It's one t-shirt and everything else is in the trash.
Well, like that's so like you talk about things like having value and like, yeah, there's monetary value. So I did museum stuff actually, like in college. And then for a year I ran a Frank Lloyd Wright house as a museum. Actually that was 2 years in Phoenix. And so like, I have a useless degree in imbuing old objects with meaning. And so like, yeah, you have to, either have personal memories or like something attached to that item that actually does give it value, but it's always going to be personal value.
Right. Yeah. And it's always like, for my thing, it's just like something like from very early on. It's one of those things that's like from very early on to this thing that I do. I have this one thing and I just hold on to this. I've given every single one of so whenever we get t-shirts made now, I get one and I just give them all away. I had a fan come through town not too long ago and I just gave him all my rare shirts.
See, that's cool though. I'd make a quilt out of them.
Street Fight quilt.
Street Fight quilt. It'd be rad.
There's probably enough shirts at this point. We're always selling something and patches. So when we first talked about you doing the show, you had just quit a job or gotten fired?
No, I quit.
Okay.
I quit at the time that I needed to leave though.
It's always a 50-50 prospect when you have somebody on Street Fight, whether they quit or got fired, because take a lot of calls from people who get fired too.
I don't think that they ever would have fired me. And then it was just like, I can't do this job anymore.
So what were you doing?
So I worked for Planned Parenthood in Arizona. I worked for the advocacy side. So a thing that a lot of people don't realize about Planned Parenthood is that it's actually two nonprofits that are like the same thing. There's the C3 side, which is the actual health centers that you can go to and get checked out and stuff. And then there's the advocacy side, and that's the political side. It's the C4. And so they have to handle their money differently and report taxes differently. And so I worked on the advocacy side, and in a Planned Parenthood advocacy group, on the local level, what you have is a bunch of, especially after the 2016 election, there was just like this insurgence of people who want to volunteer with Planned Parenthood to do activism in general. So like you've probably seen on the news a whole bunch of like people wearing pink shirts and yelling outside of like senators' offices and stuff, or people doing like actions. In Arizona, we had we actually had like, and still have, a group of 120 volunteers that go to Planned Parenthood clinics and stand out in front of them wearing these pink vests that say clinic escort on the front of them, and they have umbrellas. And because like we've got religious fundies like yelling at everybody as close to the clinic as they can possibly be, we walk patients into the clinic and sort of distract them from people yelling horrible things at them so that they feel more comfortable when they're getting care.
Yeah, Brett actually does that here. He does the
Oh, that's so cool.
Which I think is like that, and it's so cool because he's such a baby about the cold, and he even does it during the winter.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing in the summertime too. Like in Phoenix, it's like 110 degrees outside, and we still have like, you know, every Saturday morning there's there's at least 3 people out there wearing pink vests, and they're so funny because they're like this little collective group that they share like different ideas of like, oh, I found this thing that you put around your neck and it just blows cold air in your face and then the battery dies. Or like they would constantly hound me about getting like a water cooler outside, or like, you know, we'd stop by on Saturday mornings and just drop off a large water cooler full of just ice, not even water bottles, just like throw this on your face at like 10 a.m.
I'm actually, this is so off topic. I think I'm definitely going to Phoenix in May to do a live show.
Oh, that sucks.
But I also think I'm going to Phoenix for a vacation in April too. So I'm a Phoenix
rad.
guy now. I'm Mr. Phoenix, I guess.
Phoenix is a good time to go. Or yeah, sorry, April.
May's bad? What's up with May?
May is when it's going to start hitting like 100, 105.
It's all right. I got to see. I guess my family's making me do it. So, and I might be on tour anyway, so I might not make it. Who knows? But yeah. So, you worked on the side that you worked on the political side of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that shit? We've had people that work on the other side.
You've had like nurses and stuff.
Yeah, we did a show in Pittsburgh where we raised money for abortions right before it was our last show of 2018.
Oh yeah, I heard that one.
We had people come up and talk about it. We had like people come up. We had a couple doctors and a couple people that do this stuff. Do you have the problem? This is the thing that I learned from this is that there are fake clinics.
Yeah.
That are right across the street from the real clinics.
Yes.
Did you have that experience?
So actually the clinic in Tempe, Arizona, like about a year and a half ago, we switched locations to this new place. It was perfect. It's like a double strip mall where there's a shop front in front of it. And then in the back, there's another strip mall that you can't see from the street. And so like the easement is way bigger. So all the protesters have to stand like literally like half a football field away, which is great for our patients. But there was a ballet studio that right after we moved in closed down, and it got bought up by a local church, and they opened a CPC. And so Tempe is actually the closest to a crisis pregnancy center in the United States. It's literally 6 inches away. From our property line. Have
you ever gone into one before?
Yeah, actually, when I was in college, like one of the reasons that I'm so into reproductive justice is because like when I was in college at the University of Michigan, I accidentally went into one, and they like told me that abortion was illegal in the state of Michigan, which is a lie. And I believed them because I was 17 and an idiot. And like there was a series of extremely bad health repercussions that fell out from after that. And like, you know, now I do the sort of activism that I do specifically because I don't think that those people should exist. Like right. I was in the hospital for 9 days as a result of a series of decisions that I made being informed that abortion was illegal in the state of Michigan by a clinic that is it's a lie.
Right. And I think I spoke to somebody who said, or one of the people that came up and spoke said that they even they'll lie to the landlords of the buildings a lot of times and say that they're not going to do what they end up doing because I mean, like they have found in Pittsburgh and in Pennsylvania that it is kind of effective to protest outside of those, because a lot of times the people that own the buildings have no idea why they're coming in there, and when they find out, they
you just cut out
trouble. They just I'm sorry. So around the buildings, so a lot of times people will protest outside and they just don't want the trouble. The landlords don't want the trouble in the buildings, and they'll get rid of those crisis centers because they just don't know what they're doing when they come in. They lie to them and shit. So
yeah,
you can consider protesting outside and seeing what happens there.
Well, and that's what I encourage a lot of people to do. Like, I mean, if you're, as we would tell the clinic escorts like all the time, like it literally is our policy. Like, don't the clinic escort team basically started because in 2015, like halfway through 2015, there was a group of people that were counter protesting the protesters, and it seemed to like be agitating and confusing all of the patients that were just trying to get into the doctor. And so they got together after hearing that, there is such thing as clinic escorts everywhere. And they started this group that eventually just sort of folded underneath the Planned Parenthood Advocates Volunteers. And like, the number one rule is like, don't engage with anybody. Don't, like, if you're inspired to go yell at like anti-abortion people, like don't do it outside of an abortion clinic, because that's just going to agitate like people that are seeking actual health care. Go yell at a CPC. It actually does a lot of good.
Yeah. I mean, the people that are protesting outside of the clinics want to get yelled at. That's obvious. They like that because Brett said you're not even really allowed to look at them when you're doing the escorting, because they don't want you fighting out there. It's pointless. I mean, I cussed at some teen that tried to hand me an anti-abortion paper downtown, but this wasn't in front of a clinic or anything. I was walking and they tried to hand me one of those things with a fetus and a dime on it, like a flyer. And I was like, I don't want that shit. Just real angrily at some teenager.
Well, and sometimes like it's hard to not yell back at these people, like every clinic escort has a moment where they like break and they have to like, take off their vest and go like yell on the other side of the building, or sometimes they'll yell back. I don't think I can hear you, man.
No, I'm not talking.
Oh, okay.
I was good.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, this time I'm not talking. I think what happens is it cuts the audio when one side's not talking, so it sounds like the other side's not there when you're talking. I don't know.
Gotcha.
This app, this internet. Okay. My wife here's the problem, listeners. My wife is upstairs watching the damn TV, and it's taking all the bandwidth away from me, and I'm sure that's the problem. See?
Yeah. So
have you done any escorting?
Have I done any escorting? Yeah. Like I would try to fill at least 1 or 2 shifts a month. The whole time that they were like, I had a bunch of different but volunteer teams that I would like supervise, and they were one of several. But they were like the most active, and they're the ones that are actually providing mutual aid to a community. And so I don't know, they were kind of my favorites.
How was your experience? I mean, how did you like, I mean, there are a lot of people who want to work for Planned Parenthood that are listening to this show. I mean, we get a lot of emails about like either getting a job as an organizer or getting a job at Planned Parenthood or an abortion clinic, like pretty much every week at this point. And it's like, there's only so many of those. But what can you say about your experience working there?
It's definitely like, it's for a certain type of person, because like being a volunteer organizer in a capacity of like a vertical structure like Planned Parenthood, where there's a huge brand and an ideology, and there are like a set of tasks that come to you from people in DC, and like goals that you have to set, and like weird, ideas that you have to reach, where you can't just have a body of volunteers and be like, hey, we've got this plan. This is the thing that we're going to do next. And just like, go do that. You're being told to get people to do other things. And I think that, you know, at least for me, like going into it, I was like, I was my main task that I was hired for, like my grant, was about reforming sex education in the state of Arizona. And I was like, oh, well, I can come up with a billion different ways to do that. But that's not the way that the organization wanted me to do it. I was supposed to like persuade school boards and get people to show up to school board meetings and, you know, get like, start from a grassroots level to get these different school boards to adopt in-district policy in order to hopefully eventually change some of the state laws. And, you know, like not quite realizing that when I was first hired on, or even like really at any point that I was working there until like the election, I was like, well, I have this idea for this. Like I had this idea for basically like a grassroots education program, because so in the state of Arizona, there's a law. It's ARS 15-716 section C. And it's like they refer to it as quote unquote no promo homo, or NPH. And basically like in 1994 when passed the federal law that said like we're going to give each state funding for HIV/AIDS education, you just actually have to teach it, and a bunch of states freaked out, including Arizona, and they were like, well, we'll do this and we'll teach HIV/AIDS education, but we're going to make it illegal to talk about gay people while you do that. And so that really fucks up things for a lot of teachers and students and their parents in terms of like how sex education curriculum is actually talked about. Like those lines and parameters aren't exactly clear. If you can even mention that gay people exist, if anything that you say about gay people existing is like cast in a positive light, you're infringing on the law. And then also like, how do you actually talk about the transmission of HIV/AIDS when like, you know, it does have a certain amount to do with like how sex is actually performed. You can't be honest with students. And so like, I remember when I was in like 6th grade and they showed us the HIV/AIDS video, and it was like a blue screen. It was like one of those VHS tapes, and they like rolled in the TV, and it was a blue screen. And then there was like a black triangle, and that was the AIDS. And then there were like white dots everywhere, and those were white blood cells. And then the AIDS triangle would poke the white dots until the white dots shattered. And they were like, that's AIDS.
Oh, Jesus. I don't remember how they taught us about AIDS because I'm 40. So yeah, I'm sure the way they taught me was horrendous. But
they probably didn't even, because they didn't actually give a shit about teaching it until like 94.
Ohio's I think as far as sex education goes, I think we might be a little better than you would expect. Like I know my daughter learned about hand jobs in her sex education class.
That's just fascinating to me because like Ohio is there's this abstinence only curriculum called Ascend. And it's the lady who came up with it is from I think Bowling Green.
Yeah.
And there's like an institution there for Ascend and everything. And it's like she actually has a position in Health and Human Services under Trump's administration. And like I know that she had like a huge influence over Ohio sex education, which is so it's weird that your daughter is actually getting one.
It also is very possible that the school district we're in, everybody is just kind of cool with it and the teachers can get away with, but this is actually, the thing is, it's a private company that comes in and does the sex education. It's not her teacher. Like a private company came in, and my daughter was like being real funny about it. And one of the things she mentioned was that the teacher, or the woman that came in to teach him at one point was like, oh, me and my partner were about to get into it, and I asked him if he had a condom and he didn't, so I sent him home. And I'm like, damn, she was telling you about times that she was about to have sex.
Excellent.
I love it. I I think more rare because I don't have hangups about it. I don't have hangups. Like my daughter's 14 anyway, so and like the way I'm raising her is a lot different than the way I was raised. But like I just don't feel like I like own her body, so I want her to have an understanding of everything, and she seems to be getting it. And now she's like a pervert, and just told my wife to S her D earlier.
Wow.
She's gonna be okay, but
she'll be all right.
Yeah, it's just like I don't know. I have here's something that goes. So like I have a brother. He doesn't listen to these shows, so he's never gonna hear this. He'll let his daughter watch TV with him. Fucking people are shooting each other in the head, fighting, stabbing, fucking ripping skin off. But if there's any sex, he fucking freaks out and like kicks her out of the room. And I can't watch that. There's too much sex in it. Now I find that to be like weird. Is that like, do you think that's weird? Like, yes, am I just being a pervert?
You're not being a pervert. Like, I mean, that's part of the whole reason that like we have a horrible relationship with, like, I mean, with the way that kids learn about sex is because we stigmatize it in these like really awkward ways. Like, he'll kick his daughter out of the room when like it comes on the TV. And that's sort of like a weird shaming moment for both of them where it's like high anxiety and she's going to relate like whatever's happening on the TV to like her own personal life from then on out. Like she's not learning anything from that other than this is something that's really horrible and I should never be honest about what's happening with it with my parents because then I'll be kicked out of the room and shamed for it. Like that's just sort of the anxiety that comes with that sort of thing. And so like, you don't have the openness and honesty that sometimes leads to kids telling their moms to S their D.
I am also though kind of uncomfortable. I mean, I'm fair. Like I would never be a guy that would teach sex education. Like I'm totally uncomfortable with horniness. It freaks me out a little bit.
That's fine.
Back when I was a kid, like here's an example. We're doing our zine, right? And our January zine is our February zine, which we're behind on, but we're just starting on, is sex. And the way that we got a sex zine coming out is I said, Brett, I want nothing to do with this. If you want to do it, then we can do a sex zine. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. I was like, I'm not touching it. Nothing for Brian in this scene. Like there's something like as I've gotten older, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm just as I try to just keep everything modest and private. I mean, but I'm like also like I don't just have shame around sex. Like I have it around like the bathroom and pretty much anything you do without pants on. I have lots of shame behind.
Oh no, definitely.
but like so I wanted to ask, when you were talking about that, you were talking about so these laws, sex education is basically decided. So basically the teachers don't have any autonomy when it comes to sex education. The district doesn't have any autonomy. And basically what our students are learning are a result of kind of avoiding breaking these separate laws that the government is coming up with.
Yeah. And so like so there are basically like 3 different ways that sex education curriculum comes to happen. And like on the state level, initially, like they're going to be the ones that are like just doing the academic code for all of basically whatever anybody's taught. So like what they do with federal funding that comes in, what they're doing with their own state taxes, and they're working with like the Board of Education in the state in order to figure out like what kids are going to be taught anyway. And, sometimes they'll pass restrictive laws on like, oh, you can't say gay people exist, or like, there's also another law in Arizona that says that you can't mention abortion like at all. And that's actually, a lot of states have that. So if you're like teaching sexual health, you can actually be honest about like the broader spectrum of what sexual health actually is. And, for a lot of states, I know that Arkansas is one of them. There's like a restriction even like inside of, you can't talk about abortion during sex education classes, to like, you can't talk about certain types of birth control because they're considered abortifacients. And so they just leave out birth control entirely. And in a lot of places, so you have those restrictions that are set on the state level. And then on the school board level, they'll basically define for themselves, within the parameters set by the state, like how much or how little that district wants to teach. And so like for your daughter's school district, where they brought in an outside company, there are tons of those. Planned Parenthood does it, actually. There's an entire education department of Planned Parenthood where if a school board hires them, they will go in and teach your sex ed classes to those kids. It's just that the curriculum that Planned Parenthood needs to teach in the state of Arizona isn't one that can really be taught under state law. And so like there's a couple of different private programs that are used in Arizona. One of them it's called North Star, and their 7th grade curriculum is called Wise Guys and Good Girls, and it's about holding hands and when to tell your parents if a boy has been looking at you in a classroom, and all of the different ways to say no if you're a girl. And then all of the different ways to not talk to girls if you're a boy. And so like individual schools or those school boards can basically pick out what those are. And then like if a school district doesn't want to hire outside, or if they just have like a curriculum that they've been using for long enough, the teacher has to basically follow state guidelines. There's usually like parameters of what needs to be taught and what can't be taught. And so like, that's basically, and there's also like, you can't, in sex education classes in Arizona, like you can't hand out worksheets. You can't give them homework. You can't ask children questions about what they learned. You can't have them report back to you. And so you just say things at kids in the classroom.
Well, there was like, and that was, she was bringing shit home. She was drawing, she had to draw penises all the time. I don't know if she actually had to do that or if she just enjoys drawing like penises for some reason.
Kids love drawing dicks.
I know. Well, these kids like also like hiding it from them means that they know it. By the time my daughter's 14, she's in 8th grade and probably knew a lot more than I did when I was 14 and in 8th grade. Like I didn't know shit except for what other 14-year-old boys told me, which was all wrong because they're 14. And like now they have the internet. They're on there. I've never put content controls on there ever. Not one for her. I've never put content controls on any of her stuff because I just sort of feel like my parents didn't really do it for me. They would sometimes yell at me about what I was watching, but they never really, I mean, I don't think they knew I was like sneaking pornography into the house or whatever, but like, whatever, who cares? Like these kids are all going to watch it. And it's the same thing I say with drugs. It would be better if we taught them about them instead of just saying, don't do this. Like,
yeah,
I
mean, like, think about it. Like, okay, so the sort of sex education that like, activists are pushing for, like, the good type of legislation, it's sex education should be comprehensive and it should be like age appropriate, obviously, but it should start at like kindergarten. And like, people freak out. They're like, you want to teach like 3-year-olds about fucking? Like, no, like, relationship health has a lot to do with like eventual sex ed curriculum. Like, if you're going to teach people like how to be nice to each other, or like about just like gender in general, or like the difference between what a good touch is and what a bad touch is, or like how to not pull like a little girl's hair, or that it's not cute when that happens, like that sort of thing. Like you need to start it at a young age in like a public environment, like a school. And then like, cause that's gonna like, it's gonna destigmatize a lot of stuff from like, when they end up being 11 or 12. And it's like, I mean, I was just thinking about this yesterday. Like somebody posted about little kids for these little girls in college. Like one of them told me that she had sex and she was afraid that she was pregnant because she heard that that's how that happens. And this girl was like 8. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? We need to go to the police. And she was like, I put the gum that I chewed in my friend's mouth and she put it back in mine. And I was like, God.
Oh my
like,
God.
Panic attack about like, we have to call the police right now. Tell me their name. And like, instead it was just like, she didn't have any conception of like how her human body works. Right. Giving kids an idea of what their bodies do is probably a good idea.
Right. Yeah. I've always said that. I take the same, like I talk about drugs in that way with like lying to them and telling them that they're all just bad and they're all the same and they're all going to send you down a road of debt and death is probably not the best idea, because as soon as they try one, they know you're full of shit. And with sex, it's even more dangerous because it's not like they're just going to try it. They're like going to like do the whole thing. You know what I mean? There's not like a trying it thing here. They're just going to do the whole thing. And you'd prefer to be like, I'd like you to be safe. I mean, even for me, like as a dad would have felt like, I feel like a total failure if my kid can't come to me and ask me about getting on birth control, which I feel like there's probably a lot of parents out there that like want to create that atmosphere of fear about doing that,
Oh yeah. I had a friend in high school her sister had really bad endometriosis, but wasn't sexually active, but she was. And so her sister would like go to the doctor to get birth control pills so that she could regulate like her cramps that she would get once a month, but she would give them to her sister because their mom would have been so upset, but she was really worried about it. And so like, kids are going to find other ways. I mean, she was surprisingly lucky that she was able to get access to birth control, but also like, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, create like you want a house where the kid's going to be honest with you. And I think like, especially in the United States and in conservative households, especially, it's like you're kind of, I feel like I've been discouraged from doing from having an open house by other people in my family. My mother-in-law always says, you're the parent, and it's like, nah, I just, I want this all out in the open here. I want the whole thing to be out in the open. I want us to always be talking about this stuff, because when it happens, it's not like a when or if, like, my wife, her sisters are all had babies before they were 18. It's like, for me, it's like not a when. It's like it's going to happen. It's like there's going to be sex because people do that at 16, 17, 18 years old. That's just when it fucking happens.
Right.
So, and like, she's boy crazy already, which that makes me feel good that I even know that she's boy crazy. Because man, if my parents had found out that I was like even like attracted to girls, I would have probably ran away for.
Oh yeah.
I hated that. So you weren't like, what do you think about the idea of it being of there being a place? I mean, how possible, this is the anarchist in me talking, how possible is it to reach some of these people outside of school, to reach some of these kids outside of school? I know like talking to other people's kids about sex not in school is probably going to be looked at in a weird way, but I also think that like if they're tying people's hands, we need to look at possibilities for figuring out ways to reach people when they're not at school.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like this was like the plan that I had for, creating a grassroots education program. Like so basically what I wanted to do was so on campuses, like in at school, students can have like sex ed clubs, or they can have like gay straight alliance clubs, that sort of thing. So finding a way to connect with like, GSA student leaders and stuff like that, and letting them know that there's an opportunity like at a public library, just like, take out one of the meeting spaces, get like 50 kids to show up. And then like the relatively simple, like, one of them is about like what it takes to actually get pregnant, what pregnancy actually is. how to prevent pregnancy, and then the other one is like STI training, and like how to identify and prevent different STIs, that sort of thing. Teaching just like a classroom full of kids really quick, like, because that's the other thing is that like when I was talking to GSAs and when I was talking to like students that were active in like groups like 1 in 10 and stuff like that do outreach to LGBT kids, all of these kids, they might not want to talk to their parents about it, but they're really curious, like they want to know, and they see things on the internet, but they want it from like an authority source who actually knows what they're talking about, who can like point them to other reading materials about how to be safe, or like, you know, how
an adult that tells them that what they're feeling is normal, or like, I mean, I can't imagine that if you're like an LGBT youth, how helpful it is to talk to somebody who is kind of the same as you. Like if you're a young man that's gay, it probably is pretty nice to talk to like an adult that's also gay that can like kind of explain what they went through, you know, like, and if they're making, I mean, obviously if they're making that illegal, that's damaging. And we saw a lot of stuff happen in Ohio with there was like they were trying to pass a law where teachers weren't allowed to talk to kids about being trans, and like a whole bunch, or no, that they had to report them somehow to their parents if they came out as trans, and it was like it didn't pass. This is the kind of place to pass that kind of shit. You'd have to go to like North Carolina, or, you know, I consider Arizona to have bad laws, but I might be wrong. I just remember they're the ones we got all mad at because papers laws where you had to show your ID.
Yeah, SB 1070. By the way, that still stands. It's still a standing law.
Yeah, that's what somebody warned me about, that because we're going to when we do that tour out there, they said, you know, when you cross the border into Arizona, sometimes they'll just search cars for no reason.
Yeah, watch out, dude.
I don't look like anybody you would search, I don't think. I hope. No,
I mean, I don't know. They're crazy, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so you brought up the anarchist, didn't you? This is the second part of like that program that I was talking about, like where we get kids into a classroom environment and we teach them. Find 2 kids in a group of 50 that are like really, really interested and really involved and like keep asking questions and stuff like that, and then see if they want to learn how to teach other students. So that like you teach them how to teach other kids, so that they can go out and do this. And then like they can find other people who might also be interested in teaching it. And then you can train them. And so basically you're just sort of creating like a pay it forward of sex education for high school students until you have an entire high school that's like full of sex educated kids.
Right. Because nobody can stop that. That can't, I mean, I guess they could catch you teaching it, but once you've taught it, once it gets moving, it's been taught and it can keep moving and keep kind of going. It's, you know, the hope is that these kids all having phones and shit. I mean, obviously people don't give the same degree of privacy that I give to my kid, but hopefully they're figuring out how to get to where they need to get to read these things. Not that I think we should pass the laws. I just, because I'm an anarchist and because I am I just don't have any faith in the state at all. It seems like an insurmountable task to get these schools to teach, to get all the schools. Like when you're talking about Texas, that seems impossible to me to change Texas. But I don't want to like be a person that's saying this is not a thing that can, this is a thing that can't happen. The world's actually full of possibilities. And as time goes on, people are going to catch on to this type of thing. And it'll get, hopefully these things are going to change. I don't see a ton of progress because I'm still seeing a lot of like, you know, it's very still acceptable to like have your daughter's boyfriend take a picture of you with a gun pointed at him.
Yeah, that's everybody's got to stop that. But like, I mean, I totally hear what you're saying about like not having any faith in the state or the system or anything, because like, I mean, it was my job for a year to try and change a law. And, you know, hypothetically repealing this really archaic thing where it's like, you can't say that gay people exist shouldn't be that big of an issue. Like you should probably have bipartisan support on something that's that stupid. And you can even pitch it as like an anti-bullying thing, or like, you know, you're hampering teachers from being able to do their jobs and they're under all of this duress already. Do you really want to make their jobs harder? Like, there are so many like if you can attack this subject from ways that aren't necessarily like, yes, we're making it okay to be gay in a classroom, which is obviously the goal that everybody wants, but like you can describe it in different ways that are probably a little bit more palatable to religious fundamentalists who don't necessarily deserve to have it more palatable, but they do need to vote on it. But like the moment that they hear from somebody else, or like a, you know, a priest or something, that like, actually you should just leave the law as it is, or if they don't get like a, you know, a certain favor from a senator who persuaded them to like vote on it this way, or if they just don't like the lobbyist that's pushing it because they're from Planned Parenthood and those are the baby killers, like then it becomes more difficult to actually change the law. And so, yeah, like, I mean, I'm an anarchist too. I don't think any of this shit's really going to change, but I think that it's worth kind of fighting for, like, on a personal level. And one of the things that I really liked was like, you know, I would go and give talks in like northern Arizona where I'd be in the middle of like a Mormon community at a school board meeting. And like all of them would be really upset at the very beginning, and then I'd be like, well, like, you know, STI rates are booming here, like, you know, there's bullying that's happening, this is just about like getting kids to be nicer to each other. People would ask me for resources to make their sex education more progressive.
Yeah. You know what and I keep tying this back to drugs because it's just the thing that I know the most about.
It's the same.
I always say that this is what I always say to people who like are against like being honest and actually honestly educating kids about drugs, is that you're never going to wipe them out. And the way I know that you will never wipe drugs out is that I'm never going to quit doing drugs. There's always, until I'm dead, there's going to be one person on this planet that does drugs at the very least.
Hey, no, it is literally the same, because there's no way that the teens are going to stop fucking ever. They will find different ways to do it forever.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to have teens stand on a stage and be like, no, I'm trying to have sex from the 8th grade on. Like, I've been working on this thing. You know?
Yeah.
And I can't believe, as you watch it now, and how old are you?
I'm 29.
So you've seen this too. Your classmates and the people that you went to school with all of a sudden all become like this weird pearl clutching conservatives about 5 or 6 years after you leave high school. And it's this really weird thing where you're like, I thought we all moved past this. And now all these people are doing all the same shit their parents did. And it's so fucked up to me.
I mean, I already had that because like I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. And like we had the pro-life club and shit.
Yeah, but I'm just like you think young people are starting to get it, but then they decide they want to be their parents.
Yeah.
Like out of nowhere, it's just this really weird thing where it's like, I fucking hate my parents. Like from the age of, like, I hated them. And I don't hate them now. Like, I don't have like ill will towards them, but I would never do shit the way they did shit. That was terrible. Yeah. Like that whole process sucked.
I mean, like, I was sick for 1 day in 4th grade, so I didn't get any sex education. And if I asked my mom about it, she told me that just don't have it. Just never have sex. And then, like, you know.
You should hear you know what my dad said to me?
What?
My friend had a baby. By the way, I was 18 already. And I was leaving to see his baby we were 7. He was 17 and I was 18. And on the way out, my stepmom was like, no, too bad he had a baby this young. And then she was like, you know, you ought to use a condom if you're going to have sex. And my dad yelled, "Ew." And my parents' like advice was use 2 condoms.
Oh my God. Do not. They'll rub against each other and break.
I know. That was their advice, though. Use 2 of them.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I had already had sex when they gave me this talk. It was just, You know, it's just one of the like they were so like they're it's the same thing a lot of parents whole their whole like mindset is if this happens, we have to be punished.
Yeah.
Or the police will come and get us.
Right.
That's what it feels like, right? Like it always feels like I know because I'm a parent now that like you do sometimes think, oh God, you know, I'm awfully open with my drug use. What happens if some cop listens and decides he wants to come and be CPS and take my kid away? But she's 14 now. She can talk for herself. She knows what to say and shit like that. I don't like worry about it anymore. But there are probably parents that are worried about that with sex. It's just because sex is like the hardest thing to talk about in the United States. You can't talk about it. I don't know. I mean, where can you really freely talk about it?
Like, no, there's not really a good forum for it.
I mean, even online where you're free to say anything you want, if you tweet about sex too much, people will be like, God, what a fucking pervert. Like how many DMs are you in where they share tweets of people like, God, that person's horny all the time? A lot.
That's every girl's DM that I'm in. It's just like, this person is too horny.
No, well, girl, that's you know, the first time I think this is what turned me a little bit into. I don't like to call myself a feminist, but would never do that.
Oh man,
this is what turned me into supporting feminist and attention to feminist like theory and speak is that my daughter or no not my daughter divorced when she was like 27 or 28 and it's a fucking cesspool from the day she changed from her married to, you know, we're not married anymore, you know, single. Like her fucking just all of the messages were like dudes that were like she thought they were friends. Oh, you know what I mean? Like they were just like, hey, what's up? I always kind of thought you were hot and stuff like that. And it was like, oh God, everybody fucking sucks.
Yes.
Holy shit.
I mean, I honestly think that it's basically just like the way, like just back to what your brother said, because I think that the way that most people experience like any idea of sex to begin with is through accidentally glimpsing something on television and then being shamed about it by their parents. And so like people aren't normal about sex because like we're taught to be fucking weird about it.
We're taught to like fucking run out. You're right. You're taught to fucking run out of a room, or your parents putting their hands over your eyes and refusing to fucking explain to you what's going on.
Right.
Like, it's always like it's like you accidentally, like I'll say this. My kid's 14. We tried to watch 8th Grade together. And that didn't work out. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but I have not. Okay, there's like a blowjob banana scene that was just like the breaking point where she's like, I'm not fucking watching this with my parents, and I let her watch it later away from us. Like there are things that like just watching weird shit with your parents is like, I don't know, probably not the prime way to do things.
Well, yeah.
but like I do feel like I feel like what you're saying is true. Like if it's just, I don't know, if you're watching fucking The Mindy Project and there's a funny scene where she's like having sex and like doing different things or something like that, that's not gonna like fuck your kid up forever. No. You know? Right. Totally fine.
You don't want to watch gratuitous sexual stuff with your kid because you don't want to experience sexuality with your kid. But seeing something funny about sex puts it in context.
Right.
It's separate from it being like a like specifically sexual thing that's happening on the television, you know?
I do feel really good, at least, that a lot of women are writing comedy and entertainment now, and that like she's seeing I don't know. Like, even I see a difference in my wife from when we first started dating, which was 20 years ago, and like 1999. I see a big difference in her just after, and people are gonna laugh and say it's like corny and shit, but like 30 Rock, I think, was an important show. Parks and Rec was important, and I think that there are shows like she likes the Mindy Project. Like Tina Fey did a lot, I think, for like women to feel more comfortable in their skin about stuff. I really feel that. I don't know why.
I don't
like,
think you're wrong about that. Yeah.
And I like my daughter to see that stuff. I liked her. They just finished the Mindy Project, just watching it together. And I was like, see, this is like a woman like living a life that she has sex and she parties and she like just a normal life. So I do. Part of me feels real good that more women are involved in comedy. And even just like if you go on Twitter, so many of the people I follow now are women. And I am a fucking guy who 10 years ago would have said women aren't funny.
We're not. No, I'm just kidding.
I've had to apologize. Okay. I feel like I want to apologize for believing that, but I also used to believe that women couldn't sing. So I was just a fucking idiot.
That one's big, dude.
I doubt, dude. I didn't listen to anything by a woman until my mid-20s. Like with a woman as a singer, never. I listened to one metal band where there was a bass player that was a woman, and I thought it was like a cool novelty. And I can't even look at myself from back then and be like, what even were you thinking? You know?
Yeah.
Other than I was into metal, and metal is a scene that's really fucked up.
Okay.
But that also talks about where like that really does talk about where we are now compared to then, because like there are women in heavy metal that like it's things are happening. Like I think things are different now, and
yeah,
it's getting better.
There's a term for and I can't remember where I read this. It was like a billion years ago, but like seeing women in media actually being human beings like Tina Fey did, or like the comedians that we're talking about, like creating actual watchable television for women where they're being people. It's they are women who have bodies rather than women who are bodies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is actually perfect. I mean, Twitter really changed me too, because it was like it was just this place you go to where like I totally understand that like the people that were booking stand-up comedy for TV were looking for a certain thing, so they kept getting a certain thing, where it was like I even like women's comedy when it relates to men, but I also don't think that it 100% of the time has to relate to men or their gender. You know what I mean? Now we live in a world where that's not happening anymore. But for a very long time, if you were a black dude, the only way you could get on TV is if you just talked about being black. You weren't allowed to be like Hannibal Buress, where, you're just talking about whatever. Like you only could talk about one thing. And it was the same thing with women. And now that's all gone because I think entertainment has democratized. It's kind of blown up. And like the fact that I make a living as an entertainer definitely means something happened.
There was like a Maria Bamford special from like 2008 or 2009 where she like talks about like what it is like to be a lady in stand-up. And she does that voice that's like, ladies, I've poured myself a glass of wine. Am I right, ladies? Ladies. And it's like, yeah, that's what it used to be. And then now we had like, and it was, I don't know. I remember listening to that and like, it was Maria Bamford was sort of like the first lady comedian that I listened to. And I was like, wait, like in recognizing that, she's kind of like changing it. She's like, here's my perspective on why that's stupid. Anyway, here's my comedy now.
Right. Yeah, you're totally. Yeah, I remember hers, and I remember not liking it because I was, again, the same person that didn't think women should sing or could sing. So but like now when I see stuff, I don't know. Everything's different now. We're getting to see a fuller example of everybody. And I think that's one of the things that drives like like older white guy comedians crazy is that they're a lot of their jokes don't work anymore. You know, women do this and men do this and black people do this and white people do, like, none of that stuff. You can't really get away with that anymore because, one, it doesn't work, and two, because all different types of people are doing entertaining now, because there isn't that fucking, like, you don't have to make it in what I call legitimate show business to make a living doing it, you know?
Right. You just have to be able to tell a good story and make it relatable. You don't have to make every single aspect of like what you're talking about a specific experience that everybody's like ubiquitously like experienced, you know, where they'd be like, you know, the whole like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, like genre of things, like where everybody was like, oh yeah, women totally do that. Like now it's like you tell a story and you can kind of hear yourself in it. And like that's what makes it funny, not like being told women do X thing.
Right. The men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing is so funny to think about how that was kind of supposed to be a self-help book. And I think it was like, when I think about it now, that concept was really bad for us.
Yeah. You know, like, women be shopping.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Like, because you hear things like, even from my perspective, when I quit my job at the cable company and my wife was the one going to work, we got so much shit for that. And people would be like, no, you're the woman, you're more nurturing and the man is, you know, supposed to. And she's like, no, I'm not. I don't want to stay home with her. I want to fucking go to work. I hate being at home. You know? And I'm like, I like being at home. I like doing the dad shit. I like cooking and stuff. And her parents just treated me like a moocher, you know, which, yeah. What does that say about her? You know, that's the thing she used to get so furious about. And I never thought it from that perspective. She's like, she was just kind of like, they're looking at me like I'm so dumb and gullible that I'm going to let this guy just run all over me and live off of me for the rest of my life, you know?
Right. And it's actually really funny, like what I've noticed now. So I don't have a job. I just moved to Wyoming. My fiance is a lawyer. So I'm just kind of like I cook a lot and I'm writing stuff and I'm trying to get more like published and actually get out there with ideas and stuff. Yeah. And like
I am making a sex zine for February and paying for submissions. So
oh yeah,
yes, I am.
All right,
I'll talk to you when we finish the show. But yeah.
But yeah, like when I was talking about moving up here, people were like, "Well, what's your job gonna be?" And I'd be like, I don't really have a job. I guess I don't have to work. And they would be like, is James okay with this? Are you okay? What's going on with you? Aren't you a feminist? Or like, aren't you a fully empowered woman who's able to just do her own thing? Like, yeah, but I don't want to work and I don't really have to right now. I'm trying to do something else. Like,
right.
And I can.
It used to crack me up the way people would talk to me about like, don't you hate like doing the dishes and all that stuff? And I'm like, hell no, I like it a lot more than fucking going to work. Like, I hate some people. I've said this about myself and I can't say it for you, but I'm sure you could make a judgment on whether is that some people they can't do it. You wash out of employment, whatever it is. It's impossible. Yeah. And hopefully you find your way. But that's also what I think happens. There are a lot of people who don't find their way, and those are the people we should be kind of taking care of, you know? Yeah. And it might even like be mental. Like I'm sure mine's partially mental illness. I'm
bipolar type too. And I just spent like a year babysitting a bunch of like middle-aged white women for a job. So like I'm emotionally drained. And like my mom keeps telling me that like, well, maybe you can't ever have a job. And I'm just like, no, I just did I don't process emotions normally, Mom. I need a break.
Right. I
think about that like all the time. What if I just can't work?
There's no shame in it. Like, first of all, I'm talking to you now on this show, and I can tell you can figure something out. You're smart enough to figure something out. I figured something out, and I'm dumb as fuck. There's more space for people. There's more space for people to figure out a new way to do things. And it fucking sucks because none of it has health insurance, and you're never going to have all the things you fucking need. But look, if you don't want to go to a building and sit all day at a place for 8 hours and have a boss. There's a way to figure out how to do that. And like some people just can't do it. I tried until I was 32 years old. Like I worked a job for 2.5 years at a call center. And then I worked another job for 7.5 years as a cable guy. So I kind of even got to do both kinds of jobs for like losers. Really. Like there's two kinds of jobs for losers. There's utility and phone company. No, I'm kidding. But I got to kind of do the two jobs. And, you know, I ended up leaving and I was paranoid and I had a mental fucking breakdown, you know, and like I just don't think I can do it. I when I tried to start going back to work, you know, I got very lucky because I was getting ready to go to become a teacher and I had to start school in 3 weeks. And just so happened 2 weeks before that was the first live show we did with Chapo. And I was like, nah, I think I'm just going to do this for a living from now. This is like a big sold out show. And I was hanging out in Philadelphia with a bunch of people that I just knew from Twitter that like, you know, like Stephen Heck and Rob Wisman and all the Chapo guys. And I just like Leslie Lee. I just met all these new people that were all had something going on. And like, we were all kind of peers. And it was like, okay, I'm not going back to school. This is what I do now. This is my job. And then I made it work. And you can make it work. It's not
last week you guys had that you talked about just like the history of your podcast.
Yeah.
And there was like that diatribe of like, this doesn't actually happen to everybody. You really have to work at it. And you just like had like a list of like bullet points. Like if you're really going to do something like this, like here's all the stuff that you need to do. Here's exactly how you should go about like not getting discouraged when shit doesn't pan out. Like, you know, you have to really want something and you actually have to work at it. And the way that you phrased it and the way that you framed it, actually, I was like, I don't know, maybe I can.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't like you weren't discouraging. You were like, this is a thing that people can actually do. And I was like, shit, I need to write more.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, like, you can do it. It is just like so little gratification, instant gratification, and it sucks. And it's like, oh, 5 people read this, or 5 people heard this, 40 people heard this. But, you know, I did 2 or 3 years of podcasts that less than 50 people were probably listening to, but it made me better at doing it. And now I have an audience. So it's all about grinding. And again, like, don't look at the Chapo model as a thing.
Like, no, I know, definitely not.
That's the biggest mistake everybody makes, though, is they think that's how. Felix. Yeah, everybody thinks that's how it works, and I'm like, no, they're the anomaly. There are other people. Right.
Everybody's like, I'm just as funny as Felix, and it's like he had 20,000 followers before he even started this,
right?
So like,
and nobody's as funny as him. He's a machine.
Yes.
Like, anybody who's talked to him is like, oh shit, that's just him. He's just a joke machine. He's just like the funniest guy in the world. So this was really fun, and again, we're going to make sure we get you in that sex zine if you feel like it. If like, I'm not forcing you to do anything. And this was very fun. And I will definitely have you on again. I kind of want to have you call the call-in show and talk about some of the sex ed stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Because that goes out over the air. And I'd like people to hear what you had to say. And I admire what you did for a year, even though you feel like nothing got done. You worked for something. And you can find her at Epona West. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I'm the ghost wife.
Okay, she's the ghost wife. Just look that up. I know how I found you. Me and you were fighting with a conservative together, which is the best way to make a friend and a follow.
Yes, that is correct.
All right, follow her on Twitter. She's sweet. Good. I call everybody sweet. It wasn't just a woman thing. And she took me out of my comfort zone tonight. We talked sex, and we'll see you next week. I believe. I don't want to say it, but next week could be Brace, or last week you heard Brace. I don't know. You fucking get it.